Hello and welcome back to the Karla Eli Show. My name is Karla Eli, and I'm here to guide women towards wisdom so that they may unlock a life of abundance by mastering the feminine balance. I'm super excited for today's lecture. A little bit of context for this. I'm about to open up your eyes to the education system, specifically in the United States. If you haven't been open to it or exposed to it already, I am going to be sharing with you some of the statistics, some of the research that I've been doing for a couple of months now due to speech and debate, and I'll be sharing my own personal story and my personal anecdote in regards to the education system itself and why I decided to step away from the public education school system and why I decided to take 3 years off. I decided to detox my brain completely for 3 years. And a big part of it was because I didn't want to get into student loans. At some point, I ended up getting a job where I would refinance a lot of students who had overdue on loans. And I realized how fraudulent the university/college system really was and how much it screws you over. Also, I noticed that the only help that was really out there in the States were for people who were like making not that much money. Like the middle class were really getting screwed over by the education system or higher education system, like universities and colleges. So the people that could really attend college were people who were extremely impoverished. And by that point, if you are extremely impoverished, your focus isn't on going to school, your focus is on surviving or the top 1%. And today I'm really going to be diving into these hard topics, giving a little bit of tea about the case that I studied during speech and debate. And hopefully all of you can take one good thing, and I'm going to teach you how to position yourself in this chaos of a world. Again, I'm going to specifically be touching on the public education system in the United States because I attended school here. So I'll be able to poke at holes that I've noticed and that I've seen. So if you're someone who is debating to go to college or to take a break, I hope that this video helps you out. And for those who are listening and who are parents and you think that sending your kids to college is the best option for them, I hope this video helps you as well. Without further ado, let's get into today's lecture. Welcome to history class with Karla Eli. I'm so excited to post this or to share this with all of you because I'm extremely passionate about education, and I'm just so excited to get into today's history class. I'm going to be talking about the founders of the public school system, the philosophers, and their ideas and their ideals with the way that they wanted us to learn and consume information and education. Hopefully you'll learn a little bit about economics and education as well, and how free education is not for the best interest of the normal people like you and I. I consider myself a very average, high middle class type of woman. So hopefully all of you relate to this and it's an eye opener for all of you. But moving on, my story. Okay. So as all of you guys may know, I am currently in college, and it's like ironic, right? Like, okay, so you say not to go to college, but you're in college yourself now. Yes, I am in college myself now because of different reasons. One, I understand what I need now because of my profession and my career. Also, I'm not going to a 4-year college. I'm going to a higher education form of college. You could say like community college, to gain a specific certificate that has a guaranteed job for me. And I'm not going to disclose what I'm preparing myself for until I have the certificate in my hand. But just know that because I did my own research, because I've gone through this entrepreneurial journey myself, I know exactly what the market needs and I know where the money is at in the market. So I'm not guessing like, oh, I should become this because I want a job. Like a lot of people go into college thinking I'm going to get a good job, and that's just not the case, unfortunately. So But that's not about my story. Specifically, I want to talk about the speech and debate team and my thoughts on speech and debate and why I love it and why I hated it and why I decided to stop attending, stop being a part of the speech and debate team. And it was due to time, and I needed to prioritize my time. But here's my story. So I joined the speech and debate team thinking that I was gonna go with people who, how do I say this? Critical thinkers, right? Because I love doing extensive research. I really love debating. I like being devil's advocate. I really like questioning people, and poking holes in people's arguments. It's fun. I love it. And I like when people challenge me and my arguments because that makes me use my critical thinking skills. So that's one of the main reasons why I joined speech and debate. I also realized that I needed to work on my speech and work on being a quick thinker on my feet. Honestly, I had a great time. The skills that they learned there, oh my goodness, they are amazing. Not only do you learn how to do research, how to find credible sources, how to write speeches, because you have to write speeches that are 8 to 9 minutes long. Sometimes you even have to memorize them or know them from the back of your hand. And you have to learn how to keep your cool in moments of interrogation, because they ask you, during cross X, which is like when someone is asking questions about your argument, like you have to learn how to keep your cool. There's a lot of amazing qualities that I personally learned and took from speech and debate. But one of the instances that I had, well, let me backtrack. I was disappointed because of how predictable these spaces were. You can assume the type of arguments that we would get into, anything that had to do with like racial or like sexual orientation, like that was all brought up. And to me, just it's not stimulating for me, because it wasn't stimulating for me because those issues are just, I don't want to say that they're not relevant, they are relevant, but I don't think that it helps you like in the real world to attain jobs or to be like a public figure and things like that. And some of the things that I started seeing these judges allow for their students or for debaters to do is like cry while giving their speeches, complain and use victimhood while they were giving their speeches. And these people who would practice victimhood or crying or not being able to process emotion were winning. And I said, you know what? The whole reason why I joined the speech and debate team was so that I could practice how to have self-control, how to be quick on my feet, how to be compassionate and speak in an empathetic way for other people to understand the message that I'm trying to convey. But I don't think that this is a space to do so. Because the judges and coaches were rewarding behaviors that were and are extremely toxic. So then that made me dig even deeper. I was like, the problem here isn't the speech and debate team. The problem is the way that the education system is set up. Why is it set up this way? Why are people in a way kind of mindless and like don't have emotional control? Why is it that we're accepting such victimhood? I started to ask myself these questions, and before another classmate of mine brought up another case that he wanted to do, I was like, I'm giving up. I'm quitting speech and debate. This isn't for me. This is not for me. And later, soon enough, one of my classmates said, hey, I plan on dropping this case, because the case we were talking about were NFU, a no first use. And I'm not going to go into detail what a no first use is, but basically that was what the case was about. No first use, very military, very like typical speech and debate topic. And he said, I want to drop that case and I want to talk about the education system, because I don't like that speech and debate is supposedly all about critical thinking, but we're not using any critical thinking skills. We're just trying to manipulate judges to vote for us so that we can get a win and we can have some type of win in our score for the speech and debate team. And I said, that's fair. And what we found was insane. What we found about the education system was crazy. But that was, when I say my story, this is like what it's come to now. Every time, now that I go to college and I see these kids that are like 18, 17, 19, 20, they're not ready for the real world at all. The public school system failed them. They can't communicate. They can't stand up for themselves. They don't, it's awful. And they're so pressured to go to college to get a good job. And you would say, well, Karla, like they're still going through their self-discovery phase. Y'all, if we pay attention 20 to 30 years back, like before, a lot of these 17-year-olds back then were full-grown adults. They had their own identity. They knew how to cross the street. A lot of these kids are like looking down on their phone, not knowing how to cross the street. And I'm not saying that I blame all of this in the public education system. I say like 80-20, the last 20, it's like I don't want to blame the parents, but like the accountability falls onto the parents as to why their kids are not like, I don't want to say adult enough, but like, so they can't survive in the real world. And it's not because of so much the protection aspect. I think it's because they're not living enough. They're not placed in circumstances where they have to figure things out. Because every time you place a kid to figure things out, it's like, how could you do that? And so that's really what I wanted to talk about on my story through the education system and why I never fit in. Because I was always that critical thinking like, okay, but just because you go to college doesn't guarantee you a job. No, I don't want to be super hyper. I don't want to be this independent, super hyper independent woman who can do it all. Even though I can, doesn't mean that I have to. You have to pay attention to the agenda. The agenda. What is the agenda of the education system? And today we're going to be talking about the founders of the public education system. So that's a little context for how and why I started doing a lot of research on the education system. Moving on. Okay, but why care? Why should you care about the education system in the United States? Specifically, if you live in the United States or if you have children who go to school in the United States. I'm not going to get into I'm not going to talk about the curriculums that go on for, public education, free public education, because I would literally take up like 2 hours just talking about how awful the curriculum is. But you should care because, one, it molds our generation. It molds younger generation, and it, in a way, shows the values and the morals that these kids are going to have in the future. Because right now, what we're seeing is mom and dad both go to work. They don't have time to be with their kids because it's expensive. Life is expensive, and they don't have time to stay with the kids. Or sometimes in my case, for example, even though my mom stayed at home because I'm first generation, she didn't really know what the public school system here was like. She didn't know what they were teaching us. She didn't know anything. But because we were raised with morals and values, whenever something was brought up in school that I didn't agree with, I wasn't afraid to say like, no, that's wrong. One of my favorite courses in high school was math because there's only one right answer. And if you didn't get that answer, then you're wrong. So there's some sort of truth there, but any social science or any history or anything that had to do with the teacher putting their interpretation into it, I absolutely hated it because it was a very skewed way of looking at things. So you should care because it's molding our future generations, and it's literally pop culture. Education has so much to do with pop culture and the way that the economy is ran. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Here are some statistics. Last time I said that 94% of graduates are unemployed. That was my bad. I didn't realize that until I watched back and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so wrong. But typically it's 54, about 54% of college graduates are underemployed. And basically what underemployed means is like their college degree they're in a field where they didn't really need their college degree, or they're not getting paid what they should be getting paid. And here are some statistics from 2016 through 2023. And the average is about 40%. I think the lowest was in June of 2020, which was 38.1% were underemployed. But the rate is like 45. I saw some of them were like 54 at some point, but average you could see it's like in the 40s, right? That's a huge percentage of people who are literally in debt to go to university, to go to college, and now they're being underemployed. And I got another one from the Washington Post. Recent grads are more likely to be unemployed than other workers. And here's a little graph for you. And this is, again, analysis by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So you can go ahead and kind of like gauge and see that most college graduates are more likely to be unemployed than people who just have a high school diploma. And most of it has to do with life experience. So yeah, you might have a college degree, but what about life experience? Some people are getting smart and they're, getting remote jobs while going to school at the same time, which I think is great. I did both as well. So I was working pretty sophisticated jobs while going to school. So I had a lot of skills and talents on both ends of the spectrum. And then I stepped away from school because I needed to survive. I needed to pay my bills and I couldn't go to school. So that's what we found, a part of what we found. And then we started digging even more. My partner and I, my colleague and I, for speech and debate. And this is where things get kind of creepy. The founders and the philosophers who started, or who modeled and found the perfect program to get a lot of young people into a room and start educating them. So meet philosopher Johann Fichte. The creation of Prussian education system was founded on the belief that individuals who had free will were a threat to the security of the imperialist regime, and an acceptable risk for a perfect system and liability on the battlefield and at home. Philosopher Johann Fichte, the notorious envisioner of the Prussian school system, asserted the following, quote, "Education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. When the techniques have been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need for armies or policemen." I need you to listen to this man. This is a philosopher who conducted the Prussian education system. Prussia is now known as Germany, for those who don't know. And he was the philosopher of creating the school system in Prussia. And what he is basically saying is that free will is dangerous. Allowing for people to use their critical thinking skills is dangerous. What is better is education should aim at destroying free will so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than their schoolmasters would have wished. That is scary. What they're telling you here is essentially, we want you to believe whatever the government wants you to believe so that you have no ability or no capability of thinking on your own, of having self-sufficiency. And in a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and show you why this correlates to the US. Let's go into it now. But I hope that this is making sense. This is scary stuff. In short, what he thought was the education school system, or the school system, should learn how to control its students so that they can do whatever the heck we want them to do. Because again, if you're not in the top 1%, if you're not already wealthy enough, the only really access to education, some sort of education, is a free one, right? And we have to consider as well let me go to the next slide, and this will make sense a little bit. Okay, how does this connect to Congressman Horace Mann? In 1843, Horace Mann was a congressman who was known as the father of American education. He was nominated as the head of Massachusetts Board of Education with the goal of reforming the American education system. He researched various different types of education models in European countries to find the one that would work best. The verdict? The Prussian education system. Horace was so impressed that he personally traveled to Germany to learn the system. When he got back to the US, he heavily pushed Congress for his system to be mirrored in the United States. Horace's influence caused high-ranking officials in the education system to follow in his footsteps, and they themselves would travel and get degrees in Germany under the Prussian system, and then spread these teachings across high schools and universities alike across the country. Make sense now? So this congressman, Horace Mann, basically said, okay, I need to find, because remember, 1843, we're thinking Industrial Revolution. We're thinking labor laws, right? So a little bit of more history. Once the Industrial Revolution kind of happened and there was a whole bunch of factories, a lot of these kids were being used because they could fit into small places that a lot of adults couldn't. And due to that, a lot of kids were dying because of the factories were not in safe or workable conditions. So after that, they decided to pass some labor laws where children couldn't work, right, at a specific age. So that meant that you had a whole bunch of children doing absolutely nothing. So you wanted to do, because now it was illegal to have these kids work, right? So now you have a government who needs a workforce to run these factories, to work in these factories, but they weren't ripe enough. So what do? You do this. You do what this man did. So in 1846, Horace Mann's 10th annual report led to the first state law that made it mandatory for kids to attend school in Massachusetts. This led to their letting the government indoctrinate the children of Massachusetts under Prussia's model that was tailored for the US's interests, or putting the reporters in jail. All of these actions begin in the name of inaugural claim for any emerging or veteran politician. It is a necessary responsibility of the state to ensure that education is provided for every child. As we know now, this is implemented across the country, and it is most commonly associated with truancy laws. What this led to was obviously a skyrocketing in attendance and a new legal way to influence every single child in America under the supposed safe haven that was education. So basically what this man did was, okay, I like the Prussian school system. I want to implement it in the United States because now we have a whole bunch of kids. We need factory workers. We need the working class to be functional and smart. What better way to control them than to make it mandatory for children to go to school? And he started in Massachusetts. So I don't think that they thought that it was going to last this long, but this piled over time. And it gets worse throughout history because at some point they're like, okay, we don't need factory workers anymore. We need people to learn how to build cars. We need people to learn how to build astronauts. We need people because, again, war, military, and the economy drives the education system. They're not giving you education for free. The government is expecting you to give them something in return. Please remember that. And that, which leads me to my next point. Economics drives education. I hope that this makes sense to all of you. I know that this is literally like history class, but it's really important for us. So why is this important? Economics drives education. Depending on how a country is ran, the United States is a first world country and it uses capitalism, and there's pros and cons to the system, whatever. I'm not here to discuss that. What I'm here to discuss is the flaws in the education system and why you should be careful if you are going to invest 4 years of your life into getting in debt to hopefully get a job in the workforce. And you need to know that if economics are good, that drives education. If economics are bad, that also drives education in a way that is not so good. And what we're starting to see now is an influx of people having a degree but not enough experience, or having a degree in a field where there's, out of like 100 people who have that degree, only one is needed to fill that position. So what can you do now that you know a little bit more of the history of where the education system stems from? It's literally meant to control you in the way that you think. It's propaganda, and it's meant to influence you so that you don't think for yourself anymore, so that you think that you need to be a literally like a working class citizen to get anywhere. Now that you know that, what can you do? What can we do to prepare ourselves? Like, how can we escape this awful mind game, this awful programming, right? Because all of this, by the way, goes into why a lot of women don't know how to receive, why a lot of women think that they have to be super hyper independent, and why they can do it all and why they should do it all when that's not the case. And also it contributes to men versus women and women versus men. This adds to the divide that we're starting to see now. Hence why a lot of men are already lonely. Hence why a lot of women are super hyper independent and they don't find men to be attractive, or they yearn to be in a romantic relationship, but because they're already high earners themselves, when they look for a partner, a lot of them are not as prepared as them. And it's because of this school system model, because now we have it flipped, where women were like, now we're empowering just women and we're kind of like ignoring the men. Again, this is my own speculation. This is what I've seen. And the education system seriously drives pop culture as well. So it's a very scary thing, but it is happening. Now, what can we do? What can you do if you are a parent? What can we do if you plan to be a parent and are not a parent yet? Or if you are in the process of going to college or currently attending university, is it even worth it? Would I recommend for you to do this? I'm going to share with you what I did in the last slide, and how I'm getting college basically paid for now. But what can we do? What can you do? What can you do if you want to protect your kids, you want to protect yourself, you want to protect your future life? What can you do? Position yourself wisely. You need to learn how to position yourself wisely. Again, because we do talk about scripture here, we're faith-based women. This is what I have to say about this. To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. Again, notice who are the people that are able to control what curriculums are being seen, who control where the money goes, where the money market goes. It's like top 1%, right? Or people who are very wealthy, people who have accumulated generational wealth, right? Sometimes they don't have the best intentions for everybody and they screw the working class over, not all the time. But most of the time, this is the case. Hence why this new phrase of eat the rich came about. Do I agree? Do I disagree? I'm not going to comment on that, just because I don't know too much. To me, it's a little, I don't have time, honestly, to talk about that and dive into that. But this is what God says. God says, listen, my children. What I gave you was wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. I gave you those three things. But to the sinner he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth. But to the person that is on the, top 1%, what I gave them was the skill of learning how to gather up and store up wealth. Not for them, but for them to be able to hand it over to you. Okay, you need to learn how to position yourself wisely. This is what I say. This is what I mean when you need to learn how to position yourself wisely. What we need to do is I'll ask, how can we work under these people? How can we work under big companies, under this leadership? What we need to start asking ourselves is, how can I partner up with this person to become their right-hand person, or to become their mentor, their coach, or whatever? How can I do this? How can I achieve this? How can I position myself in the right way? I go deeper into this in my one-on-one mentorship, because I teach women how to upscale their businesses and how to like work smarter, not harder. And this is a way. God has already called us and has already told us. I literally have given these people the money and the resources to give it over to you, but because you're not positioning yourself properly, you can't receive the benefits. How can we position ourselves when we don't even know that we're being programmed to believe and to think a specific way, to have this poor person mindset, right? And this is a little bit of like a prophecy or like a prophetic word. Those who act wisely now will be of refuge to those who are not preparing. Listen, things are about to get really weird in the next couple of years. Just saying, you didn't hear it from me. You did not hear it from me. But things are about to get a little strange within the next couple of years in regards to like the economy, with social media, with like power structures and stuff. The only thing that you can do is prepare yourself now, not just with like knowledge, but like storing up some wealth and protecting yourself, because you're going to be a refuge to those who are not preparing now, who are not thinking in the future. And listen, I'm already taking those steps now, because I see myself in the future, my family, and just my family, and then my future generations. Like I'm almost certain that my home, my name, everything is going to be a refuge to those who have nowhere to go. Things are getting weird out here. And I don't say this to scare you guys. I don't want to sound like a crazy person, but I think God has been knocking on our door for a little bit now, saying like, hey, if you're my child, it's time to get ready. It's time to get ready. Open up, open your eyes, wake up from your slumber. So I say this again, those who act wisely now will be a refuge to those who are not preparing. I'll leave you with that. Again, you know you are on the right path when you are going against the current. Remember, we're salmon. That's how God says, right? We're always going against the current. The moment that we're going with the current is when we are making a mistake. And this is what I mean by this. So yes, I had to stop education for a little bit, but for those of you that don't know, there was a time period where my parents took a 2-year break, and during that 2-year break, I decided to live on my own for a little bit. I decided, and I was young. I was like, what, 18, 19? I was pretty young. I had fresh out of high school, and I had never lived on my own before. At that time, I had a good job still. I've been so blessed. I had a good job. I was working for the city, and I was getting paid pretty well, for an 18-year-old anyway. And I ended up moving away from home because I thought, now that I pay my taxes, now that I pay for everything of mine, I can apply to get financial aid in school. To my surprise, the way that FAFSA, I'm sure that you've heard this word before, keyword, FAFSA works is you can't apply for financial aid independently until you're 24. I didn't know that until I was there on my laptop in my own little mini studio at the time, thinking, what did I do? Now I have to continuously pay all of these things, and I can't go to school. I can't continuously go to school because I have to pay my bills with no help at all. And at the time, not at the time, I come from, again, like high earning middle class. So I knew that I wasn't gonna receive any income, any financial aid. So I had two options: get married or wait until I was 24. And then that's how my unraveling of like, I want to get married kind of happened. I'm not saying to do this at all, but now that I'm married and because, you know, my husband is ex-military, there's certain benefits that I receive and because of my background and what I do, blah, blah. I applied, now I can apply for like financial aid. Now I can apply for specific grants. Now I can apply for like scholarships and things like that because I qualify. But back then I didn't. And honestly, it was the best decision that I could have ever made. I'm not saying that if you want to go to college, you shouldn't. What I'm saying is don't feel pressured by society that you need a title to tell you that you committed a 4-year commitment. You don't need that paper. What you need is drive. What you need is intention. What you need is to like position yourself in the right places. Don't work harder, work smarter. And that's what I'm teaching you here today. And I hope that this is all making sense. I know that I can't see you or like see if this makes sense to you, but I hope that this opens your eyes if you are a parent, if you are a potential college student, or if you're going to college currently. I need you to think wisely. How is the education system rotting your brain? Because it really is. That's what's happening. And I've already proposed to myself like that I would most likely be homeschooling my kids. And if not homeschooling them, like probably hiring teachers to come to my house and like teaching them and keeping an eye on what they're learning because of how bad the education system has gotten, how rotten it has gotten. It's not about learning anymore. It's about controlling morals and values and instilling these things into children who are so tiny. It is very, very sad to see. And in the product of this, the coping mechanism that comes from the education system is victimhood. Very, very sad and disappointing. And I end this with saying, choose wisely. If you're going to go to school, if you're going to go to college and you're just fresh out of high school, choose your career wisely. And I talk about this in my one-on-one mentorship. I give you the 3 recession-proof business models that you need to look out for, 3 skills that are never gonna go out of trend. And a good way to give you a hint is to study luxury brands. Study luxury brands and why they last so long. And you'll find a pattern between all of them. You want to replicate that in your own life. Get a career that is timeless and that is always needed. And most of the time, it's like I've always said this, if you're going to go to university and college and you're going to spend a lot of money, it better be in a STEM major. Because everything else, all you need to do is gain experience from one job. That's all you need. That's all you need. If you are not going to school for STEM, you're wasting your time, frankly. Again, my opinion. So that sounds so bad. But I mean this in the best way. And I want to go ahead and end it with saying this. If you are someone who wants to go to school like myself, let me tell you that you can, but it might not be at the time that you want to go. If that makes any sense. Like I needed to go through my own little self-discovery journey in order for me to go back to school. Now I'm getting, I'm receiving extra help. Like it's honestly great. I've always wanted to go back to school because I genuinely love school. I love learning. And I know how to discern between the teacher's opinion between like history and patterns and facts. Now that I'm older, I can, but when I was young and I was impressionable, it was very hard for me too. So I hope that you guys all use this to your benefit. I hope that this class made sense. I hope that it helped you out to either make a decision, inspire you, that you don't need a college degree to be successful. They're lying to you when you say that. And if you do have a college degree and you are successful, good for you. But that's not for a lot of, there's literally like 40+% of people are underemployed and with debt because they listen to someone tell them you need to go to school to be successful. No, what you need is a character to want to move on with your life. Like, listen, my dad, and I'm gonna use my dad as an example. My dad only had a high school diploma and he is a top 5% earner. Top 5% earner. Okay. And my dad always tells me, if I could do it, you could do it. And it's the truth. Even no matter in which economy that we are in, is it going to be harder some years? Yes. That's why I suggest reading The Psychology of Money, because you get to see the patterns and the changes of the economy and how that influences everything. Educate yourself in that way, and trust me, you'll be further ahead. And that's how I'm going to end this lecture. I hope that I was clear. Let me know in the comments, or let me know in the questions. I know that it's hard. Like right now, we're living very interesting times, but believe me when I tell you that if you learn how to study patterns, you learn how to study patterns in business as well, you will be able to perceive and be able to make wiser decisions. And a good moment in time to analyze was during 2020. If you know what happened, you know what happened. During 2020 through 2021, when the whole world was shut down, ask yourself, which jobs remained open? What was considered essential that they weren't let go of their jobs? Those are the jobs that you want to invest in, or be able to provide a service for the top 1%, people who will always have money. Remember, it's all about positioning yourself in the smart way. I hope that this gives you some clarity and some hope for your future. I love you all so much. Thank you so much for supporting me and supporting this channel and this podcast. I will be talking to you all shortly. Bye-bye.